There's a popular internet fan theory that I would like to dissect. Fury Road was one of the most popular and groundbreaking action films of the last decade. However, many people like myself were confused at the sudden and drastic personality shift regarding the main character Max. No longer solemn and methodical, Max is now a raving lunatic who can barely keep his schizophrenic episodes under control long enough to help the other characters of the story. In order to explain this personality shift, a fan theory was developed. It's a different character. Who exactly? The mysterious child from The Road Warrior. This bizarre and mostly mute child appears in the second film of the series and grows an instant fascination with Mel Gibson's Max. It would only stand to reason that many years later he would idolize this strange road warrior he met in his youth. Let's analyze the evidence. In The Road Warrior, Gibson gives the child the small music box that he found earlier in a derelict oil truck. In Fury Road, we see the exact same music box being played by one of the women that he's helping transport. We can more than likely infer that it's the same one that he kept after all these years, quite possibly giving it to the woman to help distract her like Max did to help the feral child many decades earlier. Both the feral child and Tom Hardy's Max have the same go-to primary weapon, a boomerang. This is probably the most blatant piece of evidence that it's the feral child grown up. They're putting it right in your face by having Max use the same weapon. It's almost a nudge to the audience that this is the character's true backstory. Director George Miller has stated in interviews that part of the reason Gibson was not asked back was because he always intended Fury Road to be told with a younger Max, not an older one. Gibson's Max would have been pretty close to over the hill by this point in the timeline. The story would have transformed into the character's somber last stand as opposed to the high-octane action ride that it ended up being. Thus, if it's the feral child fully grown up, it makes more sense. It's a passing of the torch and a new character, pretending to be Max, starting his own series of new adventures. Furiosa asks Hardy what his character's name is towards the end of the film.
Max. My name is Max.
He makes a facial expression almost as if he's taking a few moments to think about it before finally saying Max. Some could argue that this was Max deciding whether or not to open up to others, but I think it's the feral child deciding what his name should be, finally deciding after a few seconds to base it off the person he idolized in his youth. Like I mentioned at the start, Max completely changes character traits between films. While he was reserved and quiet, it was mostly due to his depression at the loss of his family. When talking to others, Gibson's Max could still hold a conversation and make logistical plans. Hardy's Max is both insane and incoherent, barely speaking at all, and when he does, mostly in grunts. This is not much unlike the mute child from The Road Warrior, who also only spoke in grunts. No matter which way you slice it, there's an overwhelming amount of evidence pointing to the theory being true. It also provides a stable and narrative reason for why the character changed personality traits. Now let's try to debunk some of the evidence why it's not the same character. The opening of Fury Road shows Max's trademark police car from the other films. Why would the feral child have it? My counterpoint is that Max's car is destroyed in the second film, and this continuity continues into the third film beyond Thunderdome. Max is forced to ride a wooden caravan around in the third installment due to his vehicle no longer existing. Thus, I believe the car returning in Fury Road is actually because the feral child attempted to reconstruct it due to his idolization of Max. The second point against this fan theory is much in the same vein as the car. If it's not Max, then how does he have his trademark one-armed leather jacket? For this, I offered the same response as the previous point. Max loses his jacket in Thunderdome, and is without it for the rest of his journey. Thus, I believe it is once again the feral child attempting to emulate his hero. I think it's safe to say that it would be relatively easy to find a leather jacket and cut one arm off. It's the feral child cosplaying as his hero, essentially. In the end, only fans themselves can say what they think is canon and what is not. I personally think it's one of the more compelling fan theories I've read, and certainly wins the record for most supporting evidence. Perhaps a fifth film will answer this question once and for all, but until then, it's just one more mystery in the wasteland.